We're good? Okay, so once again, it's Clayton Thomas, Chad Canepa, talking about fun stuff, health, wellness, detoxification, detox drops, make a little money, having fun. This morning we were talking about kind of a top 10 list. You know, David Letterman started it. Maybe it was going on before. You know, there was the 10 Commandments. That was kind of popular.
That's right. Yeah.
But Letterman did good with the top 10 list. And we were looking at different segments that you can really touch on with one simple product.
Right.
And we came up with those, and you put together a top 10 list. And you know, since I'm not very smart, and you're a lot smarter than I am, you actually have it written down. We can kind of go over those. But I think the first one that we had was moms, right?
Right.
And for you, if we were to look at just detoxification, that's a pretty good market, right?
Very much so. Earlier this morning, I was like, okay, this product is so dynamic, but it's extremely broad spectrum. Like, it applies to anybody, from A to Z. And so I'm like, if we're going to market this thing, it's so broad. I wanted to be able to narrow it down to kind of top 10 dynamic things that maybe people could remember after the first time hearing it. And you hit it right away with mothers, motherhood, moms.
Yep.
From birth to babies to wellness and performance. And yes, that immediately hit home.
Because the important part, is with moms, the Environmental Working Group, the World Health Organization have done a lot of research and looking at conception. What's in mom is going to end up in the fetus,
right?
And what's in mom is going to end up in the baby through breast milk,
right?
And if we can't clean up mom to start with, you're going to have problems,
right?
And you might not have the issues of a miscarriage, which are common with women that are really toxic, because they're going to push a lot of those toxins into the fetus, and the fetus can't handle that level of toxicity, and it dies, and you miscarry. It's not the only cause, but it happens. And then you get into some of the issues through the pregnancy process. I personally think that morning sickness could be correlated to a lot of the same issues. That at night, while the body is trying to detoxify and go through the circadian rhythm where it's regenerating and whatnot, that a lot of the chemicals and metals can be coming out of fat because the woman's burning fat heavily to feed the fetus, that a lot of those toxins build up in the bloodstream overnight, so they get up in the morning and they're sick.
Makes sense.
That's an idea. But being able to passively remove the toxins and chemicals that are in a woman who wants to get pregnant or is pregnant can be very beneficial.
Yes.
And healthy mom, healthy babies. So.
The reason it was so personal, and it's funny, I didn't tell you to put that number one, but it definitely hits home because we have experienced firsthand miscarriages, infertility, and we have a lot of close friends and family that have experienced that too. And so that's something that's very, very emotionally tough on a family. On
moms and dads and everyone around.
Everybody involved.
Because you start questioning, is it me? Is it you? What's going on? But like we've touched on, environmentally, you guys are in an environment and in a region that's pretty toxic, pretty polluted, and is very easy to see in the population of people, even close family. So
very much so.
The second one on the list kind of comes to the same thing, right? It's like, okay, if you got moms, you've got to have. I think we got kids on there,
right?
And today, it's been very well published that kids aren't as smart as they used to be. Harvard's done some research that shows that IQ levels in kids are lower today than they were 20, 30 years ago as a whole. It's also been very well proven that heavy metals like lead and mercury can decrease IQ. And you've got all these different environmental toxins, and we're dealing with pollutants today that weren't created 20 years ago, like glyphosate, as an example.
Yeah, when you look at that, being a parent takes life to a whole new level and a whole new vantage point, and anything that you can do to help.
You want to take care of the
You
little
want to
guys
take
before you
advantage of
take
the
care of
kids.
yourself.
Absolutely.
You know? And you
Absolutely.
want them to have, as a parent, we want to give our kids the opportunities we didn't have.
Right.
We want them, whether it's financially or educationally,
Mhm.
but ideally from a health standpoint, starting out, the worst thing that you see today are, parents of autistic kids, that at the age of 2, they had a healthy kid and then the kid tips.
Right.
Or childhood cancer or childhood diabetes, stuff
Yes.
that I don't care who you don't like. It's not something you wish on somebody.
Nobody. And you think about that, like if anybody's ever visited St. Jude's Hospital, I mean that right there. I mean that's a life-changing
it's a
event
gut punch.
and a process. So anything that we could possibly do, everything in our power to prevent, prevention wellness is something that I don't know anybody who wouldn't be interested in that. I really don't.
What do we have for
The
the third one?
third one was an environment, and I didn't know where you were going with it, but you said clean up your own first, and obviously it's kind of like when you're on the flight.
Yep.
Put your breathing mask on
That's
first.
right. You got to take care of yourself first, because people today we've got the class of people that are the environmentalists. They're like, oh, we got to clean up the environment. We got all these pollutant problems and whatnot, which is true. I mean,
Right.
our environment is extremely polluted. Whether we look at some of the newer issues that we've had from Fukushima, from a radiation perspective, or the global warming issues that the government likes to talk about, we know that there's pollution problems, but what people don't really look at is what's gone on previously. You got 200 years of coal mining and coal burning and pesticides and the water supplies and then soil and whatnot, which is a problem. But when looking at the environment, it really doesn't matter what we do to argue about cleaning up the environment if we're polluted.
Right.
If you're toxic and you're all screwed up, what good is it to clean up the rest of the environment? You're like, oh yeah, guess what? I got an idea. You're not going to be able to enjoy it,
Right.
Because you're sick. And while there's one guarantee that we have in life is that you're going to die.
Right.
Most people would prefer to prolong that as much as possible,
Right.
and to have a time frame in between that time of birth and death that you enjoy it.
Yes. The
Not
highest
be
quality of life.
sick, not be
Exactly.
toxic and have all the lethargic feelings, or be fat and obese because of being toxic and having all these chemicals that your body's got to deal with. If you don't deal with your own environment first, if you're not selfish in that way, if you don't put the mask on first, it's not
Right.
you're not going to be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, it truly makes sense. It does. And then number 4 was the issue of inflammation.
Yep.
I mean, that's a word. That's a common household word these days with inflammation. I don't know what the stats are. You probably do.
Yeah.
But of the things, the problems, the challenges that we have in our body, largely due to inflammation.
And you've been in the industry, in network marketing, in the nutrition industry.
Sure.
And how many times have you told someone inflammation is the cause of disease? Or how many times have you heard it?
I can't even name them, honestly, because it's always inflammation. But the thing that stuck out when we first talked was you said, instead of treating the inflammation, what if we could address the cause of the inflammation?
And does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Why has no one talked about this?
I don't know.
I don't know. Like, wait a minute.
But I mean, how could you not be excited about, we can't say cure. I get that.
Yeah.
We can't do that. But
And you don't need to.
But if we could cure the cause,
Yes.
just like you said the first time, I mean, that was...
You're like, I'm not a smart guy, but
I could figure that.
it's like, you know what, that's a correlation we could actually draw.
For sure.
And it doesn't matter if it's inflammation. And, in our industry, in the direct sales industry, people like to talk about hot words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inflammation's a big one.
Right.
You use the C word,
Can't use
and
that.
there's a couple C words that people love to talk about. We talk about cures. They want to talk about cancer. They want to talk about autism or Alzheimer's, all this stuff in between. And it's really important to understand that you hit on the key component. One, can't talk about it
Right.
legally, because we're not dealing with the pharmaceutical world. We're not dealing with drugs. We're not dealing with treating any symptomology or treating any diseases. But honestly, you can't cure cancer. You can't cure diabetes. You can't cure Alzheimer's or dementia.
Right.
Because all of those are a title for a specific set of symptomology.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, you have issues that are built within that. But like we touched on, instead of looking at the symptomology that is then diagnosed as a disease or a syndrome if they don't have a specific diagnosis, that then you're put into a process of treatment for, here's your drugs for
Mm-hmm.
X, here's your drugs for Y, and because you're taking X and Y for these things, the side effects of those are going to cause you to need another drug so your liver doesn't fail. It's that process of managed care that most people are trying to get out of now. Even the healthcare system is trying to get out of it because it's so expensive that maybe it does make a little more sense to just say, okay, primary cause of inflammation, of negative inflammation, because we know the natural inflammatory process in the human body is really important. There's good inflammation, but there's also bad inflammation. And if the bad inflammation is caused by a lot of chemicals, a lot of toxins, a lot of pollutants that are causing the damage in there, well, why don't you just get that out? For sure, that kind of makes sense. It's like having the kid in the classroom that's being the disruption. Well, you don't shut the whole class down. You just take that kid and say, hey, you know what? We got to come over here and you're going to get out of the classroom, and then everything gets back to business.
Absolutely.
It's not that hard. So.
Do you mind, for the sake of time, if we kind of ease on to the next bold print one? Number 6, as far as sports
let's touch on the ones that are important.
Yeah, you absolutely. Well, they all are to me. They all are to me. But I know that from a standpoint of time that we've got to move on. So the sports performance, the focus and energy, those are also buzzwords in the industry. But there's another one on there that I had to get you to pronounce for me. Okay. But it all made sense once you explained it. So could you touch on that?
So the proprioception aspect.
Yes.
And as an athlete, we're always looking for that edge. And really, depending upon your sport, there's the technical component of the sport, or there's the technical component of the art, whether you're playing a guitar, or you're playing the piano, or if you're swinging a baseball bat, or you're shooting a jump shot, or you're throwing a football or hockey or whatnot. There's the technical component that really comes down to the training aspect, but also the brain, the central nervous system, your motor neurons that are communicating with your extremities to cause that to be done lickety-split. And it's what creates an elite athlete. The ability to do something so finely tuned that they're doing it better than anybody else, whether it's Michael Jordan with his jump shot and his athleticism and his ability to zone out. But a guitarist that's able to play a lick at a rate that you're going, man, I don't know how to do that.
Correct.
The key component is if you can clean up the parts of the body, the brain, the central nervous system, some of those motor neurons that have been blocked, everything starts to communicate more effectively. So proprioception, or the ability to the brain and whatnot to communicate with those things, those extremities, or to do specific things, improves, even if it's fractions of a percent.
Sometimes that's all it takes to.
It's a big difference. It's the difference from seeing something and going, oh, I need to respond, versus seeing something and going, done.
Right.
And like we know in sports or performance and whatnot, that can be the difference between a championship or the difference between years and years of millions of dollars in income because you can do something better than somebody else.
Absolutely.
Or the art.
Think about it. Life's a game of inches.
Yep.
How many accidents do you know could have been prevented if they had better reaction time?
Yep.
What about our military?
Yep.
You can take that and run with it.
Yep.
Sports arenas. I mean, that's why I get goosebumps when I talk about this, because you talk about broad spectrum. Just let your mind go.
Yeah.
Pretty much anybody you come across.
And the big thing in the sports industry now, and I try to work with it as much as possible because it's a major buzzword in football, is CTE, the concussion syndrome, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But doing research, you can find that there's 2 forms of CTE. There's chronic traumatic encephalopathy and chronic toxic encephalopathy, which is one that's been dealt with for years.
Wow.
And what chronic toxic encephalopathy is a buildup of tau, which is the protein that builds up in the brain, from heavy metals and like mercury.
Right.
So you look at that and you're going, okay, well, if chronic toxic encephalopathy is due to a buildup of toxic metals in an area of the brain that causes this protein buildup and tau buildup, chronic traumatic encephalopathy is caused from concussions that speed up that process. What you have is basically an impact in a specific area of the brain that you have a lot of inflammation that we touched on,
Sure.
which also increases ionic activity. So it's an increase in electrical activity in that area of the brain as it tries to heal.
Okay.
Well, heavy metals and metals, as we know, will migrate to areas of electrical activity or increased ionic activity. So if you have a lot of mercury in your brain or other heavy metals, which we do because we have them from conception, and then we have them from vaccines, fish, just drinking water, breathing wherever you can get some of this stuff in. You have those build up, and you have an event, or sometimes multiple events, in cases of a football player or whatnot, that those metals will migrate to. Well, if they migrate early, you have earlier buildups of tau, so they call it chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's the same thing.
Right.
So why don't you just get in there and remove the metals and allow the brain to regenerate? Makes sense.
It does. It does.
Yeah, food for thought.
This is one that I would almost like to end up on, because we could go on and on, because it's, again, it applies to everybody. But this is something that has affected a lot of people's lives and still does to this day at an alarming rate. But when you look at it, when it comes to addiction and substance abuse, because this kind of all ties in together. There's a lot of people that end up experience an injury, then they go to the doctor and they get prescribed pain medicine or whatever the case may be, and then that spirals into something else, thus affecting people's lives that they never forget it. I mean, traumatic experiences.
And I think the big thing now with the substance abuse and addiction is, one, you have the need, but I think the big thing to look at is, one, from that aspect where people get addicted to the drug, but now today we look at kids, right?
Right.
And when we were growing up, we didn't have as much recreational drug use as they call today. I mean, we weren't going to grab Freon out of the refrigerator or huffing on different stuff, or doing bath salts and all this different stuff, heroin, all these things. And you look at what's going on, and we know that people are toxic. We know that that's accelerating because birth rates have accelerated in some areas. People are having kids younger, and you have all of these other chemicals that are in the environment, the GMO issues that we talk about, the other neurotoxins that are there, the excitotoxins that are put in foods and a lot of stuff that people eat today, that get into the brain and cause disruptions. And the human body and the brain are rather unique, because the body wants to find homeostasis. Your brain wants to be balanced. So what I believe is happening, and what I see a lot of, is people are trying to self-medicate. And they have triggers, and they try to feel better. So it could be smoking a lot of weed. It could be, hey, you know what? I don't feel very good. I need to find something that makes me feel better. And they don't know where to go. They're not going to go the pharmaceutical route. So they're like, well, what else is going to make me feel better? And their friends are like, hey, I got this, I got that. Try this, try that. They find something, they're like, oh wow, this makes me feel great. Boom, you're hooked. So what I've seen so far is, if you can start to clean up the brain, you clean up the rest of the body, you lose the need, you lose the trigger, for the addictive behavior, but also the need to use some of the things that are addictive. And the really cool part is working with some people, and I won't give specific names or specific instances, of watching people that have been doing some stuff like painkillers, like you're touching on, that had an injury. And it's hard because typically you can't quit cold turkey, because you go through withdrawal. It's really bad. Had a colleague that was using a lot of pain meds, and after a week he was able to he just stopped using them. No withdrawal, no problems. I think he was 27, 28 years old. And in 30 days added 30 pounds of muscle.
Wow.
Because he was able to just go be active again. He hadn't checked out. He wasn't a zombie.
Ah, yes.
And he's like, hey, you know, I feel kind of good. Maybe I'm going to start eating a little more, and maybe I'm going to get back in the weight room.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, added 30 pounds of muscle in a month, and quit cold turkey. No desire to use. No withdrawal symptoms. So, does it work that way for everybody? Maybe not. But if you can clean up the brain, you clean up the rest of the body, you see things change. And you know, there's very few people that haven't dealt with some level of addiction in their family or their friends. It's like, okay, why not work on cleaning that up a little bit? It gets back to the environmental issue. It's like, hey, let's do this, because if you have an addiction problem, where do they send you? Detox.
Right. Sure.
Makes sense, maybe.
Absolutely.
So,
now, and when you look at this top 10 list, of which, you know, we'll be able to share that.
Yeah. There will be more to come.
Yes. You know, it's just ultimately the lives that are being affected, because each one of these, you can call them issues, you can call them problems, you can call them challenges. But I really feel that we have an issue that is being addressed, and I feel like it's a solution.
It's kind of cool.
It absolutely is.
That's it. Good work, Rob.
Yeah. That was cool.
Done.
We are finished.
Good.